everyone. Oh, it's a bit loud, I might turn that down when she started talking. Thank you so much for coming. This is the first author talk that we have for 2012, which is really exciting for me because I've been in my office planning for so long. It's so good to finally be up and doing some events. And really fortunate to have Neville with us. We're really lucky. Neville's been very generous and has done a few talks with us, so it's always a pleasure. So thank you. This is the first author talk we have for New Zealand Book Month, which is running all through March. And I'd also like to thank the University Bookshop for being here. They have copies of the book for sale. They are $44.99, but you have a $5 voucher on your seat. So if you did want to purchase it, you're more than welcome to redeem that tonight if you like. Otherwise, it's redeemable at other bookshops. Neville is a writer who's very passionate about our natural environment, and in particular our oceans and the life that surrounds them. He's written the shipping news for the Argus newspaper in Cape Town and the Dunedin's Evening Star in the 1970s, and since 1990 has worked as a study leader and lecturer aboard expedition ships visiting New Zealand waters, including the sub-Antarctic region. He was an Otago Regional Councillor for 9 years, and he has long been involved in environmental politics, and in 2007 he was awarded with New Zealand's largest literary prize, the Creative New Zealand Michael King Writers' Fellowship. So that's all the information that I'm going to do today. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you really enjoy this talk. I'm sure it will be fantastic. And please give a warm hand to Neville Peat.
Right. Go the Black Cats. This is Lance Richdale's back. It's nearly 100 years old, and I'll tell you as we go through the talk a bit more about it. But actually, the first thing to say is that probably on a day like this he wouldn't have been at the University Oval. He would have been on the Otago Peninsula after he finished work, and he would have been out there with his beloved penguins and albatrosses. I'm really pleased and privileged to be here tonight at the start of this book month, because this is a book that belongs to Dunedin. It belongs to everybody who is has a great regard for seabirds, particularly albatrosses and penguins. It belongs to thousands of people who are still alive who were taught by Lance Richdale when he was what you'd call a science advisor to schools in the Otago region. But we'll come to all of that. His life was epic in terms of his work with seabirds. He gave us a new way of looking at them, a way that the world had never seen before, mainly because he spent so much time with his penguins, the yellow-eyes, and with the royal albatrosses, and he got to know them better than anybody had ever done, and anybody, I suspect, since either, because he spent so many years looking at them. And here he is with the very first chick that fledged from Tairoa Head. I guess the way he's dressed there with two pieces of a three-piece suit, shiny shoes and collar and tie, that's not actually typical of the Lance Richdale seabird researcher, but nonetheless it was obviously a photo op. The bird is 5 months old at this point, but this is 1938, and he's on the main track. In behind there, interestingly enough, if you look across there now, there is no sand on that beach. It's all covered in rocks. And looking the other way at the bird, a few months later, in fact just a few weeks before the fledging in September 1938, there were some visits to Tairoa Head. Presumably these people came with on the ferries, and you wouldn't see that sight there now today, of course. The place is pretty locked up, and the only way you look at it is via an observatory behind glass. But I was out the other day, and there are 20 chicks now at the colony this year. There were 20 last year, roughly that. and Richdale would have been absolutely thrilled to see just the development of it. He grew up in Wanganui in the North Island. This is a view of the city, the river curving out towards the sea, and he went to school there. He went to Wanganui Technical College, and here he is in the top right picture, in the centre, the captain of the first 11. He was a star both at batting and at bowling, and I probably wouldn't have guessed, even at that time where he's aged 20 there, that he would go on to be a star in quite a different field. A world name, a world authority in albatrosses and penguins particularly, but also in terms of petrels. Down on the bottom left there, he's the oldest of the 5 Richdale kids, and there he's around about 11 years old. He went from Wanganui Technical College across to Australia to study agriculture at a college near Sydney, and he was at Hawkesbury Agricultural College. He did a 2-year certificate or diploma course there. He really thrived at Hawkesbury and came back to New Zealand to start teaching in rural schools in the North Island, and spent 5 years doing that. A number of them were just sole charge. Before he saw an opportunity in Dunedin. In 1928, the Otago Education Board advertised a job as an instructor in agriculture. And I have never seen a photograph other than this, which obviously is a clipping, an image from an Otago Daily Times clipping. This is the only picture I ever saw in all my research of him at work, in his day job. And there he is in the town bout with Mornington School Form 2 pupils. I guess you can get an idea there that he wasn't very tall, about 5'7" in fact. And as I say, it's the only image I know of him actually at his day job. But we're here because he had a hobby, and he developed that from the mid-1930s, when he started going out onto the Otago Peninsula to look at the penguins. He rode a Douglas motorcycle, you can see it there, although that's not on Otago Peninsula, and for the first year or two at least, that was his transport until he bought a Chevrolet car and then was able to get around a bit more comfortably. He began, as I say, looking at penguins and albatrosses in the mid-30s. 1936 was his first visit to Tairai Head, and that's how the book starts. The book starts with a journey from Dunedin along those roads, rather rougher than they are today, and it would have taken him probably around about 2 hours to get out to Tairai Head. His first encounter was with a male albatross incubating a large white egg, and he was absolutely astonished to see this bird. He had already had contact with yellow-eyed penguin colonies on the peninsula, but this was his first encounter, 1936. He quickly could see from talking to locals that there had been some breeding already occurring at Tairai Head, but that no chicks had fledged. Eggs were stolen. The birds were attacked by youths sometimes. They were stoned. They were disturbed. They never got to fledge, any birds, in the first 30 odd years of birds nesting there. This is the 1938 chick with its 2 parents. And here it is, a little bit older, around about 5 or 6 months old now. And this is just one of the magnificent photographs that Richdale took. I'll come back to where his collection now lies, but let me say that that it was an enormous pleasure to be able to research into his photographic collection. He also took movies out there, out at Tairoa Head and at the penguin colonies. 8mm film, there are thousands of feet of it, and they lie in the Hocken today. Here's the 1938 bird now that just shortly before, probably only a week or two before it departed, and I'm still wondering what Richdale is holding in his hand there, possibly a microphone in order to capture some sound. Perhaps it's his movie camera he's got a hold of there too, but it's pretty hard to see. He quickly saw, because of the problems that albatrosses, the giant albatrosses there, and the penguins were having with people, that wildlife management was more about managing people than really about managing the wildlife. And he soon was lobbying for fences to be built to keep people out of the albatross colony. And so the top picture there is around 1940 and shows you can see the age of the car there, shows you quite a primitive looking fence being erected there, rather less sturdy than what you meet there now. And that was the main gate into it. The present visitor centre is off to the right these days. Down the bottom is a view across to Penguin Beach, which is fairly close and the closest large yellow-eyed penguin colony to Tairoa Head. And there too, there was a fence built up. The volunteers are there, and they include Richdale. He had the support for both these projects from the Royal Society Otago branch and from the Otago Harbour Board as well, both of which put money in. And Royal Forest and Bird Protection Society also contributed to it. So eventually the colony was open to visitors, and that happened in 1972. We take it rather for granted now that's been there for a long time. And Richdale's on the bottom left of the photograph. Behind him, TKS Sidey, he was the Deputy Mayor of Dunedin, the Minister of Internal Affairs, Alan Hyatt, and the Wildlife Ranger at the time there, Alan Wright. That padlock that he is operating there, I think, was there right up until about last year. That's what it seems to me. They had a padlock system up there, and they stuck to it, even under dock control. But nowadays there's an electronic, well, this from this year anyway, an electronic system, as I saw the other day. And that is a picture from the day the first observatory was open. The observatory is called the Richdale Observatory, and now there's a newer one, and it's in place. And a lovely photograph from Alan Wright with one of the parents of this chick flying above the observatory. Right from the beginning, Richdale decided that he couldn't really embark on these studies without marking the birds. They had to be marked in some way, and banding was the way to go. He got information from overseas. He got everything he could in the way of experience overseas with banding. At the time, 1938, no one had banded seabirds in New Zealand. Very few had banded them in the world. So he was pioneering. And he made his own bands, first in celluloid, then in aluminium, different gauges, different sizes, until he fixed on what he thought was the optimum for these seabirds, these big birds. The banding story itself is pretty interesting, because these days, if you're banding a royal albatross, at around about 9 or 10 kilograms of weight with a 3-metre wingspan, I mean, you're going to grab them pretty solidly. You probably have some assistance, but Richdale didn't always do that. He was so familiar with them, and they were so familiar with him, that that he would just simply kind of creep up, lie down quietly beside them, and reach over. This is what how he described he do it, and then reach over and just quietly attach the aluminium band. The point about putting this picture in is that the bird on the right is the oldest seabird the world has ever seen, thanks to Richdale's very early banding program. This is the bird we called Grandma. She's there with her mate on a nest in December 1938, and here she is in 1989 with her 11th chick. Richdale didn't live long enough to see this, but it's a picture I took in February 1989, one of the last photographs of Grandma before she disappeared at sea, never to be seen again. She only just holds the world record. There's a Laysan albatross this year that's going into its 62nd year and lives on Midway Atoll in the North Pacific. There's what we've got here though is this fantastic bird which became of course a legend in her own right and subject of a film with Richard Attenborough in it and so on. That chick has since then come back and become a parent itself. He was called Button or Buttons by the wardens. That's the chief warden, Shirley Webb there. So now just moving on to penguins. The penguins he studied intensively at about 4 different colonies on Otago Peninsula. These are yellow-eyes, of course. The birds, you can see a bird inside a hollowed out old log there, and it's on a nest, and that's the hide that he used to photograph them. He realised that they were shy birds and wouldn't really respond in a natural way to him if he was just sitting that close. His interest became very quickly the behaviour of the penguins and the albatrosses, but particularly the penguins. He would spend every sort of just about spare minute he had going down to the colonies and looking at them. That would be sometimes in the evenings if there was enough light, but more particularly at school holiday time and in the weekends. That's a sight you won't see now for 2 reasons. One is that you wouldn't see that many actually on the beach either, probably, on those rocks there, and they're at the entrance to Papanui Inlet. The ones in the water are actually another photograph. It surprised me when I saw this because he wasn't anybody to see. He wasn't a person, a researcher who would try and deceive you. He hated the idea of speculating about anything. He wanted the observations to be accurate. He wanted all his reporting to be absolutely what he had observed. But this picture has been spliced. And he had it on the back of it. He had a combination picture, and it's cut around the shoreline there and being knitted together, possibly by the Otago Daily Times, because it did appear in there. It also appeared in one of his booklets on yellow-eyed penguins. And here, a picture of him. There were so few pictures of him at work, either in his day job as a teacher or as a researcher with the birds. But this photograph from Charles Fleming, Sir Charles Fleming, 1940, is at Cape Saunders, showing him with 2 chicks. This was the nest that gave him probably the most material about penguin behaviour, and particularly family life and the breeding biology of the yellow-eyes. He reinforced it with other observations, but this is the one he camped with, and we'll come back to that as well. He was there that fine day in January 1940 with Charles Fleming and Robert Feller, 2 major figures in New Zealand ornithology, who I suspect never forgave him for not telling him of not this, but something else, an erect-crested pair that was nesting just near that nest I showed you a moment ago. He never told them because he was quite territorial about his research areas, and you know, it's not that he just didn't tell them. And Fowler was absolutely, I think, furious later that he didn't tell them, because no one had reported breeding of erect-crested penguins on the mainland of New Zealand. I was recently down in November anyway at their homeland. That's the Antipodes Island, 800 kilometres off the mainland. And you just don't see them here, except when they're occasionally straggling to Malta shore here. No one's reported them breeding to the extent that they were breeding here. They had a go, they had laid eggs for 7 years, but actually no chicks developed. But anyway, this picture here shows why I think Lance Richdale was so successful. His wife, Agnes, who had no previous interest, I wouldn't have thought, in seabirds, was his helper. She was his personal assistant, his editorial advisor, his field assistant at times that you see here at Cape Saunders, his typist. Without any training in typing whatsoever, she embarked on some amazing typing exercises. Probably typed in the vicinity of 150,000 words on his magnum opus, and I'll come back to that. But here she is. Very few photographs of Agnes either in the field. And here are the erect-crested penguins, very handsome they are as well. And they, along with, they were nesting very close to the yellow-eyes. Lance Richdale at Cape Saunders recorded 5 species of penguins. These two, the erect-crested, the yellow-eyes, the blue, the white-flipped, and the rockhopper. Just up the road at Papanui, he recorded field and crested. And just further up at Waikowhiti, molting a royal. There he had suddenly 7 penguin species out of what we now recognise as anything between 17 and 19. So, you know, he had a good third of them on the Otago Peninsula. And from that nest that he was observing at the Cape Saunders, he got an idea for a kid's book. It says there, of course, that there might be, or suggests there might be more than one, but there never was. And perhaps he ran out of time, perhaps he didn't like the reviews. One reviewer in the Southern Times didn't give him, said he needed to connect up the photographs better with the text and not spoil the story for children by saying that the father tragically had died at sea, and those sorts of things. But anyway, he produced this himself. He produced an incredible number of publications, and I'll show when we get to one that actually shows a few of them. I'll tell you about it. He had some illustrators there, and it's a wee bit clipped this, but it says the birdman leaves his wee tent to photograph Podgy and Peggy. I was intrigued by the birdman actually, because I like that as a description of him. He never called himself an ornithologist. He hated the idea of that. Or even probably a seabird scientist. He liked seabird researcher, I think. But there he is, calling himself a birdman, which is fair enough, I think. And of course, the penguins are saying that that birdman will want our autographs next. He wrote 2 books, major works on penguins, and this one, The Sexual Behaviour of Penguins, astonished the bird world internationally. It was produced in the United States by the University of Kansas Press in 1951, at a time when he was travelling around there as a Fulbright scholar. So he had a very big year in the United States, and most of it was actually travelling and speaking about penguins and about albatrosses. You can imagine, you know, that most of the ornithologists in the world lived in the Northern Hemisphere. They do. But all of the penguins and most of the albatrosses live in the Southern Hemisphere. So they were very surprised to hear what he had to say and very interested. And this book has detailed the extraordinary extent to which he understood the courtship, the displays between the birds of a pair and the general behaviour of penguins around breeding time. He had 14 different descriptions of different behaviours around that time. And Time magazine and Newsweek both reviewed it, and in Time magazine the headline was "The Dr. Kinsey of the Penguin World." As a result of that book, there came some commentary from New Zealand cartoonists, and Keith Waite from the ODT was amongst them. Break it up, Dora, here comes Mr. Richdale, and the bag's got US up there at the top, you can't really see that. Walter Nash went down to the Antarctic in the 50s as well, and he's showing that being mobbed by penguins, which is what you do get when you go to the Antarctic, but not here on Otago Peninsula. Richdale, as I say, published very widely. I thought I actually produced quite a lot, but he was an unbelievable producer of newspaper articles, magazine articles. You think about the Listener, whole series in the Listener, big long series in the ODT, and here are just a couple of his publications, self-published from his home in Kew. And the two top ones on the Albatrosses are major works actually. The three at the bottom are part of a series of 12 small booklets that people still talk about these days, and they were published in the 40s and in the 50s. His Wild series, or Wildlife series. This is his home in Skybow Street, Kew, number 23, with a big birch tree, a silver birch tree outside that I think he probably planted. The house has not much changed from what it was in his day. He looked out over the beaches towards the Otago Peninsula from there, from a study that was in a nice, I don't think I've got a picture of it here. Here's Furneaux Hall in Cornell University, where this was his first experience of overseas of working in a university. He thrived there, although he didn't spend a lot of time there actually, only about of the year that he had the Fulbright scholarship for. He spent probably only 3 months there. He was also a Nuffield scholar and went twice into the UK to study with the best of British and American ornithologists who were studying at Oxford University. In the US, he, as I said, he travelled widely. There's a picture of him with Agnes there in the in a mountain national park. A picture that I saw without any information about, and only stumbled upon it later when I saw it was published somewhere. Now I know, and it's included in the book, that it's at 14,000 feet when his knees started to get a bit wobbly with the low oxygen. On the left there's a picture of him 1933, and around the time he married Agnes. Here's Faroe Island in Favo Strait. It's about the size of the fourth floor here of the whole fourth floor of this library, and it's out about 2 kilometres out from the entrance to Patterson Inlet. And it was the place that between 1938 and 1957, almost 20 years, he spent months at a time in the school holidays studying 5 species of petrel. In 1938 there's a picture of his there in the top, and 1974 with his hut there, and the island quite denuded now of the big Alerias that were there originally, well, when he was arriving. These beautiful little birds were photographed by someone, possibly Agnes. I had no idea because, again, another photograph that turned up, and I had no idea whose hands they were until I met a niece of his in the North Island who said, oh yeah, he had an accident as a youngster in the bottling factory of his father. his younger brother pulled the capping machine down onto his right index finger and chopped the end of it off. And so you look at that, you see there isn't much nail left. So his hand's all right. And this is one of the 5 species he studied. The other one, the other main one I think, was sooty shearwater, and he wrote a major scientific work on them. He banded quite a number of them, hundreds, but hundreds isn't many in 20 odd million that probably were down in the southern hemisphere, including probably in the order of 5 to 10 million in the Stewart Island and Snares area. And it was in 1955 that this band was found off the coast of Mexico. And some of you might be able to read it. It says Tell Otago Museum, New Zealand. The band was a fisherman snagged sooty shearwater, hauled it in, took the band off it, released it, and took the band to the US Fish and Wildlife Department, which promptly sent it back to Otago Museum, and then went on to Richdale, who said, yeah, that's one of mine. It was banded in 1950, so this is 5 years later, it's picked up. But the point about it is that this is the first evidence of our sooty shearwaters migrating to the North Pacific. We could guess that that's where they went, but no one had any idea, and Richdale wasn't prepared to say that's where they went. And so this is the first evidence, and last week I took it to the Hocken and placed it there for future seabird researchers. Here's Pharaoh again with the problem, illustrating the problem for the trees there. The Stewart Island shags have colonised it and completely cleared all the woody vegetation off it. If you are familiar with the island Wharekakahu off Allen's Beach, you will have, and watched it, you will have seen the same thing happen there with Stewart Island shags. And if you look out towards Green Island, you'll see a similar process going on there with these. These are ground nesters, they use pedestals, and they seem to change the soil chemistry around to discourage trees. When I went on to Pharaoh, and it's not an easy place to get on, you jump off, a rocking boat. Richdale had to do that many, many times. And the hut is now a ruin. It's slowly sinking into the soil there, and amongst you can just sort of see the old fireplace, the grill, or the front part of it there, and the timber all just sinking into the island. It's covered now in just a few herbs. Just now to coming towards the last few slides. This is the hectomedal. It was New Zealand's premier scientific prize. At the time he was awarded this in 1950. We don't know where it is. It has disappeared, possibly at the time he went into a rest home in Auckland, and disappeared maybe before even he died in 1983. But the legacy is tremendous in Dunedin now, isn't it? When you think of the penguins, the albatrosses, and the tourism around that, that's worth $100 million a year to the Dunedin economy. You think he has, and it all paths lead back to Lance Richdale. So he has left us with a tremendous legacy. Albatrosses, yeah, there's his picture, or one, there's probably Isabel MacArthur's picture, but of the bird that he helped fledge in 1938. He went down there and guarded it so that there wouldn't be any vandalism. And in 2007, so 70 years on, we've got Toroa born there, the 500th chick with its mother. And what do I push something?
No, I just tell the library stuff that you just sort out their security.
Looks like it. I think that's a prompt to say I'm just about out of time, which I... Anyway, thanks for that. It's it's hard to sort of describe the life of this guy in a way. I mean, it's a little late to be writing his biography because I never met him. But Chris Robertson, who worked with him, did, and he's written a beautiful foreword to the book. And also his, from 1967, Chris has been involved with the Tyro Head research in a supervisory way. But Richdale is certainly, I think, deserves to be called a genius. Just simply for the painstaking effort, the meticulous manual analysis of screeds of data without the use of a computer, not even a calculator. But I have a calculator of his at home. And that brings me now to just to talk about where is the memorabilia of Lance Richdale. Most of it is now in the Hocken collections. In the mid-1980s, the Stuart Strawn made contact with this chap here, Terry O'Callaghan, now aged 80, in the Bay of Islands. He was a son of a dairy farmer, never married, but became interested in seabirds as a teenager, wrote to Lance Richdale, and made a trip down here. A couple of trips actually. His sister was on the Air Force at Tyre at the time, in the post-war years. But Richdale must have taken a shine to him to the extent that he trusted him with his material. So when he went overseas, he sent his papers, his photographs, and some of his treasures there. Terry also bought some things. So when Stuart Strawn, the Hocken librarian, went up there to collect the stuff, he got some of it, most of the paperwork, all the flat stuff, all the photographs, the glass plates, the negatives, and the slides, and he got, but he didn't get everything. And I think I've probably now collected up most from Terry. He was very generous about it. I said it would all end up in protection here. That camera actually, and one of those photographs, the bottom right, are in the Otago Museum right now on display in the nature galleries, telling the story very briefly of Lance Richdale alongside the diorama of Tyro Head. The camera, which he took many of his beautiful photographs on, is a double reflex Rolleicord from the mid-1930s. Those three photographs are in the 1940 New Zealand Centennial exhibition, and those I brought back to Dunedin. And two of them are in the Hocken and one in the Otago Museum in that display that's there right now. Those blue bound volumes in the distance there solved the mystery in some ways, because that is the magnum opus of Lancelot Eric Richdale. It's 700 pages on the yellow-eyed penguin behaviour, and it was the basis of his two books. But no one really knew where they were. They were copied at some one point, or there was a copy made and then recopied, and the university has a few, the science library. But no one really knew where the originals were. And the original came back here with one illustration attached. It was a map of Otago Peninsula with the colonies of the yellow-eyed penguins in code, like Z for Cape Saunders and W and B and all the rest of it. And that had been clipped out by the Defence Authorities in 1940. It had been excised from that because they thought it was too dangerous to send overseas at that time in case it fell into enemy hands in 1940 in the Second World War. It came back to Richdale, and so did the copy. He was sending it to the Oxford University Press, which rejected it as a publication. But that was mainly because of paper shortage and I think, kind of publishing conditions at the time. An interesting story, but Terry, we owe Terry a great debt of gratitude for keeping safe the Richdale memorabilia. And here's the book. I think those of us involved in it are very proud of it, that it's come out. We're very grateful it's come out too, because it's been talked about for maybe 20 odd years, a biography of Lance Richdale. The publishers here tonight, Otago University Press, and Wendy Herricks, and with Lisa Bevanseller here tonight. So yeah, and so thank you for attending this. I always get a buzz out of speaking about Lance Richdale. He has been a hero of so many people for so long. He remains our biggest name in seabird research overseas. If anyone overseas is doing a book on penguins or the great albatrosses, they will be probably citing the work of Lance Richdale. And you know, Dunedin is a lot to be proud of him, and you know, the legacy continues. Thank you.
Thank you.